So welcome back to the Small Business University. My name is Christopher Reagan, and in this lesson called S-Corp Elections and Extensions, we're going to cover kind of a deep dive on S-Corp elections, meaning how to turn an LLC or corporation into an S-Corp, and the tax extensions that are required if an S-Corp cannot file their return by March 15th. Most of this lesson is on S-Corp elections, but extensions can be related to this, so I kind of decided to combine them into the same lesson. Probably the hardest concept here is what we call late filed elections. This is usually needed if a company has not filed the S-Corp election within 75 days of the company starting or the new tax year. But they want to be an S-Corp, so we have to do something called a late filing election, and I'm going to take you all the way through it. We're going to take a look at scenarios. We're going to really make sure we have our arms around this. We're going to deep dive into it all. So let's start first with what an S-Corp election is. So to create an S-Corp, you must complete a 2-page form and either mail it or fax it to the IRS. I have both pages up here in the slide. This form is called the 2553. You'll hear us refer to it quite a bit inside of Halon, in lessons, even as we talk to clients, saying things like, well, what about your 2553? When did you file the 2553? What was the effective date of the 2553? And what we mean is this form being completed. It asks for the company information at the top of the first page, what the tax year will be, and tax year is always going to be a calendar year. Don't go setting up any fiscal year S-Corps that start on April 1st or something like that. There are ways to do that, but they are super complicated, and do not ask me anything about them. They're not needed. They're all going to be January 1 through December 31st. And then you have to sign at the bottom of the first page. The second page has all the shareholders, how much of the company they own, and each have to sign next to their name. So this is kind of an interesting IRS form in that it requires multiple signatures in the same form. It requires an officer of the corporation to sign at the bottom of page 1, and then it requires each of the shareholders to also sign next to their information on page 2. It's not a complicated form to complete. What is complicated is when you need to file it, what the time frames are, and whether the filing is on time or whether you need to make special changes to it because you're filing it late. We will talk about that in the next slide. For now, just know that these are the 2 pages that need to be completed. Halon can prepare these for you. Just go to, and I'm going to give you a website, and I'm going to show it here to you. You're just going to go to 2553, so 2553.halontax.com, and we can prepare those for you. Let me show you what that web page looks like. All right, so here's that page. You can see the web address right up here at the top, 2553.halontax.com. And what you're going to do is fill in your information. This is you as the accountant's information here. So you're going to put in your email address, confirm it, and then your cell phone number. The reason we ask for your cell phone number is because we use that in the security and verification piece whenever we're delivering the form. So enter your cell phone here, and then your client's business information and the shareholder information. You can add as many shareholders as you want to here. The effective date, I've put a little note here next to it that says, this should be the first day you want the S corporation to be active. So if today is July 2018, but you want to go all the way back to 2016 for January 2016, and we're going to get into when you can do this, you're going to put the effective date as January 1st, 2016. And the system is going to realize that you need a late filing election and create it for you. So after you're done all with that, you hit create 2553 now, and the form gets not only created for you, but it gets reviewed by our CPA tax team before it's sent to you to make sure it's perfect. And then you have your client sign it, and you can fax it into the IRS. So that is how Halon can prepare these things for you. One little note about this piece of software: if you need an S-Corp election in New Jersey or New York, it is not going to work because we don't have those up yet as of May of 2018. We should have that complete by August or September of 2018. So if you live in New Jersey, New York, and you're trying to do it here in the summer of 2018, we do not have the state elections ready, but everyone else, you don't need a state election, and we will make sure that those of you who are in New Jersey and New York, if you need help with this, contact support, and we'll put something together for you. Okay, now that you know how to have the form done for you, reviewed by the CPA tax team, etc., let's talk about when this form needs to be filed. Is this a big enough slide for you? So clearly, I'm wanting to communicate 75 days is a very key metric when we're talking about S-Corp elections. And it's really this simple. To be on time, to file the election on time, you must file the 2553 within 75 days of the start of the tax year. For every corporation, that would be January 1st for the year you want to be an S-Corp, which means March 16th of every year is generally when these S-Corp elections must be filed. Because if it's not a brand new corporation, which we're going to get into here in a second, it's always going to be March 16th. The only exception is when you start a new corporation. Then it's 75 days from the day that the corporation started. So if you started your corporation on, let's say, October 1st, you would have 75 days from October 1st to file the S-Corp election so that it is effective on October 1st, the first day you had a corporation. So in your first year, the corporation can be an S-Corp so long as the form is filed within 75 days of when you started. If you have been an LLC or a corporation and this is not your first year, if you want to be an S-Corp for this year, file this within 75 days of January 1st. That means you don't need a late filed election. You just need the regular form, so it's no big deal. Let me kind of show you a slide that's going to visualize this a little bit. And this is kind of our timeline slide. We're going to see it several times. So in this example, let's say that we wanted to be an S-Corp for the tax year January 1st, 2019. To do an on-time filing, we must have it filed by March 16th, 2019, which is 75 days after January 1st, when we want it to be effective. We can even file it the year before. See how on the slide here I've got on time is even before January 1st? That's because, let's say you had started this corporation in 2018, but you didn't want to be an S-Corp for 2018. Maybe it was a single member LLC and it's running a loss and you really only need it to be an S-Corp for 2019. You could file the 2553 anytime in 2018 or all the way to March 16, 2019, and it would be considered on time. So always think of this March 16th deadline as the last day. But if you want it to be effective for January 1st, you could file it anytime. If it was 2017 and you knew that you weren't going to be an S corporation for 2017 or 2018, but you knew you wanted to be for 2019, you could file that 2553 in 2017 and then wait until 2019 and your S corp election would be effective, if that makes sense. Let me show you another scenario here. So now, in this example, I have a new business. Okay, same principles, but it's a new business. The business was started on October 18th, and they want to be an S-Corp for the rest of the 2018 tax year. Okay, now I need to make sure that it is filed by January 1st, 2019, which is 75 days after October 18th. I need to make sure that my S-Corp election is filed by January 1st. That means I then am an S corporation from October 18th through December 31st of 2018 and for forever until I change that. Now, let's say that they did not want it for the 2018 tax year, but they did for 2019. Then my tax year for 2019 starts on January 1st, and I would have until March 16th, kind of like back in the other example. Kind of a word of advice on new businesses here. Make this easy. just file the S-Corp election when they're first started. Don't try and time this where, you start something in July and then you're like, well, maybe we don't need to be an S-Corp until next year. Don't play that game. Trust me, you will miss it and you'll be frustrated. So just get in the habit. Anytime you've got a client that's setting up a new LLC or corporation, just file the 2553 at that time. You're going to be an S-Corp from the beginning of the LLC or corporation's existence forever, and you're just done, right? Don't make this more complicated than it has to be. So that was on-time elections. Let's get into the more complicated issue, which is what if you miss the 75-day deadline? You can still be an S corporation. The only issue is you have to file what's called a late election. Late election means that you're filing it after the 75-day mark for an effective date in the past, and you have to put some special information in the 2553 so that the IRS will accept it. Our Halon 2553 generator will do all of this for you. So just enter the effective date, meaning the date you want the entity to first be an S-Corp, and it will create all the late filing parts for you. You must file the 2553 within 3 years and 75 days for this to work. So let's say it's 2019 and you want an effective date for your S-Corp to be January 1st, 2017. So it's 2019 now and you want it to be for January 1st, 2017, so 2 years back. That is fine. That can be done. But only if the entity has not filed a return for 2017 or 2018. If it has, there's no going back. Tax returns being filed, even if it's a Schedule C for the business, means that this is no longer an option. You cannot go back and late elect. So let me show you some of our timing slides again and kind of look at this more graphically. So this was our first scenario. We wanted to be an S corporation for January 1st, 2019, the January 1st effective date. Only now we've missed the filing by March 16th. We have not filed the 2553 by March 16th. As you can see, anytime after March 16th, now we must include a late filing election for our client to be an S corporation for January 1st. This will work fine. IRS always accepts them if they're done properly. Hint, hint, if they're done properly, have Halon create them for you. But just have these dates in mind. Let's take a look at another slide here, and it'll make a little bit more sense about this 3 years and 75 days back kind of idea. So in this slide, let's imagine that today is July 15th, 2018. How far back could we go to convert an S-Corp for a company? Well, we know that we can go back 3 years and 75 days. That means we can do it for the 2018 tax year, right? We can go back and be an S corporation for January 1, 2018. We can even go back to January 1st, 2017, right? And we can even go back to January 1st, 2016, because today, July 15th, 2018, is within 3 years and 75 days. Now, they could not have filed a tax return for any of those years, right? If they did, you can't go back to them. But if they haven't, then we could go back to them. However, 3 years and 75 days ends May 1st, 2015 here. So can we go back to January 1, 2015? No. We could maybe have it be an S corporation starting May 1st, 2015 and go all the way back to this date, and then for the partial year you would be whatever you were supposed to be, and then starting May 1st you do like a short year tax return from May 1st through December 31st, 2015. But I can tell you, probably just from a working perspective of what this is, just have them go back to January 1st, 2016 and ignore 2015 and say, hey, you're out of luck. And here's why. The IRS doesn't really give refunds if they are in a kind of a refund position after 3 years. So I would, in these kind of cases, I would go back to January, 1st, 2016 and just be done with it. If you get into a complicated situation like this, the best thing to do is contact Halon support and let one of our CPAs walk through this with you to make sure it's going to go exactly how you want it to. Remember, we're your tax department. We're not just a tax return filing service. We are engaged to make sure that you have a full tax department at your back. So use us. It's our job to work this kind of thing up for you. Let me keep going on this late election piece. Let me give you some tips on these late filings that are going to be helpful too. My biggest warning when doing elections to prior years is if the year you want to elect for has ended, like you're doing the election in 2018 for the 2017 tax year, okay? The year 2017 has ended. Just make sure that you file the return quickly. If you go back 2 years, file them even faster. And here's why. Penalties are adding up the moment you elect. The longer you wait, the more that it's going to be. If the taxpayer has not filed returns for like a year or two, they're already looking at penalties anyways. So just warn them of the issues and kind of soothe them with knowing that the self-employment tax is going to be helpful in offsetting. You know, the reduction in self-employment tax compared to whatever they were doing is going to help them. But let me kind of go through some of these bullets. So first, no tax return can have been filed, remember this, for the business in the years you want to be an S-Corp. That includes Schedule C. So if they filed tax returns, stop talking late filing completely for those years because it's not going to work. Penalties for not filing an S-Corp return on time, which you're immediately going to have if you're doing these late filings, at least back more than a year, because all of a sudden they were due March 15th of the previous tax filing season, and the penalties start as soon as the election is created. So those are $195 per shareholder per month. Penalties can usually get reduced, but requires a letter to the IRS. If the self-employment tax savings is big, like at least $4,000 per year, then it's usually worth it. If you're going to save them $1,000 by going back that way, I probably wouldn't do it. I probably wouldn't risk it, really. There's no way to go back and run payroll. So if you go back 2 or 3 years on an S corporation, there's no way to go back and run payroll for all of that. So sometimes it's best to have in those tax years a 1099 to the owner from the business, to where they are paying some self-employment tax on an amount of money out of the business equal to whatever you would have run payroll for. It doesn't mean you're going to get out of an issue with the IRS. The IRS has said 1099s do not replace payroll, but at least the tax will have been paid, to where if the IRS does want to restate some of this stuff, we'll help you with it, but we can at least have the client have paid the tax. You know what I mean? Where it's not a big tax bill too. Most of the time I've not seen the IRS really challenge this stuff. If you're going back, I can tell you this as just a tip from Chris. I would not really go back and late file S-Corps unless they're going to save like $7,000 or $8,000 each year. You know, because if you could go back 3 years because they haven't filed, but if they're an S corporation, they save $8,000 a year, which totals up to, you know, $24,000. Well, then yeah, that's great, because you can charge them, you know, between the bookkeeping for it and everything else, you can charge them 10 grand, 12 grand, and be like, hey, you get half, I get half. How's that for a deal? Otherwise, you know, it's not really worth it. But this year, whenever we started Halon and started this training, I got a lot of questions about late filing S-Corp elections. And they are a hassle. So you want to make sure that it's worth it. You don't want to save $1,000 or $2,000, because at the end of the day, it's probably not worth the headache then, okay? Also, I have attached a document in the downloads that does some of these scenarios for you. And I posted it to the Facebook group too. It's a document, a PDF, where I do several scenarios on late filings and look through that as well. If you do get confused on any of them, just contact Halon Support and we'll help you walk through some of this stuff. Now let's get into the extension part of our lesson. Extensions allow you to file after the traditional tax season for S-Corps, which is January 1st through March 15th. Not a lot of time. right? To get all of this work done, which is why we have, you know, it's kind of why we have our books ready to go at the end of the year, right? And going back to practice management, we want to have all of our clients virtually completely caught up as we go into the first of the year so that we can start doing these corporate tax returns right away. But if the books aren't ready and you can't, turn them loose to Halon to get a tax return done in a couple of days, then you need to file an extension. And if an extension is filed, you have an additional 6 months to file it. So that means until September 15th. And you can see in the slide that's called extension season. So we have tax season and extension season. By extending the return, what you avoid are the late filing penalties. So for instance, if I extend a return, I don't get any filing penalties. But if I don't extend it, that $195 per shareholder penalty starts accruing. So that's why we extend these things. For S-Corps, they don't pay tax. So really the only penalty that we're trying to avoid with filing extension is this shareholder $195 per month. And I'm telling you, these things can add up. So it's worth making sure you're always doing extensions. You can usually get out of these penalties, as I've said before, you can usually get out of them. But in future years, if you're not doing extensions, the penalties will stick. I kind of want you to think of extensions as one of your best friends. They are not something to fear. They are something to encourage. They allow you more time. And that means more clients with less staff. If you can extend the tax season from January 1st to March 15th to January 1st to September 15th, meaning you extend half of your clients, that means you can do double the clients with the same amount of staff, because eventually tax season will start to limit you staff-wise because you just don't have enough time to do everything. As your firm grows, this is going to be a huge benefit. So use the extension when you can. And calm clients down about using extensions. Most clients are very fearful of them. Tell them there's nothing to be worried about. Some think extended returns are audited more, but that is actually not true. The IRS has told us time and time again that extended returns are actually audited and noticed less. So extensions, if we were to kind of communicate something to our clients, extensions are safer than filing on time, at least statistically. There's probably a lot of reasons for that. Extended tax returns are probably done by more professionals, and so their accuracy is probably higher than stuff that's done during tax season. I can tell you it's that way for 1040s too. But these are nothing to fear, and use them. Don't be shy about them. Don't feel bad about them. If you've got to extend all your tax returns, do it. I mean, there's no problem with them. I am going to show you here in a little bit where there's a little bit more work that comes along with them, so that piece could kind of be a drawback, but use the extension is the bottom line. And here is what an extension looks like. This form is used for many different returns. I've outlined our S-Corp code in red there, and the piece of it that we use. And the way that this form works, you basically put in a code as to what kind of tax return it's filing, and it is a very simple thing to get done at the IRS. Some states require extensions too, but many accept the federal, meaning that if you send in the 7004, it extends both the federal return and the state return. Halon will extend tax returns for you. And notice something, this form does not need to be signed, and it can be e-filed. So it is, I'm telling you, it's easy. Halon will do all of your extensions for you, but you must have them set up in Halon within a week of March 15th. So you need to have these around the 7th or 8th of March. You need to make sure that at least the clients are set up in Halon. That's why it's so critical. It's really, really critical to get all of your Halon clients loaded and in the software before tax season even starts, during the year. When you onboard a new client and set up their books, you also need to sync them to Halon. That way you can just kind of sit back and relax and are ready to file at a click of a button. Halon, we will not let a return go unextended if they are loaded in Halon. So be safe and get them in there. That way we know that you intend on having us do things and we start taking responsibility for them. Extensions must be filed on or before March 15th, the day the returns are due. So what happens, what happens to the taxpayer if you extend their return? What is their life cycle look like after you extend their S-Corp return? Well, let's take a look at the next slide to find out. So there is a lot going on this slide here, so let me kind of go through it. First, the S-Corp gets extended, and that means the taxpayer files Form 7004 and the return is extended until September 15th. No taxes due for the federal. There might be some tax due for the state depending on what state you're in. This forces the taxpayer to extend their personal return. So any shareholder of that S corporation now has to extend their personal return. You could avoid extending the personal return if after March 15th, but before April 15th, you get the tax return done. But that's really rushing things again. Halon can do that for you. I'm just saying, don't put that kind of pressure on yourself either. If they need to extend their personal, they just need to do it. The personal return is extended with something called the Form 4868, and taxes may be due, right, on their personal return, so payments must be made. The extension and any payments are due April 15th. If the taxpayer is not sure what is due, the taxpayer has to guess. And typically we tell taxpayers to pay on the higher side of what they think things are going to be. That way, if their estimate is a little off, they still avoid late payment penalties. As I said before, taxes must be prepaid. So always remember that taxpayers should be paying estimated taxes during the year. If they're not, and they're just waiting until tax returns get filed, and then they have this big penalty because they didn't pay their taxes even then when they filed an extension, that is not the accountant's fault. The accountant is providing them the estimated tax payments they needed to pay through the year, and they should have paid those during the actual tax year. And the only penalties that would be accruing is if they ended up owing more than what was estimated. So try and make sure that you encourage your clients to pay their estimated tax payments. And if they're using a tax service of some kind, that's to do their personal tax return. Even TurboTax issues quarterly tax payments, so they just need to follow the guidance. Estimated taxes for the next year also need to be guessed. So what happens is, let's say you're in 2018 and you're doing the 2017 tax return and you've extended the 2017 tax return, it still means that the estimated taxes for 2018 need to be paid, so quarterly. So you need to estimate those, not you, but whoever's doing their personal tax return needs to estimate those going forward. This is kind of where the frustration for the industry comes, in that people aren't willing to pay more for personal taxes because there's a lot of work that goes into it. But because there's H&R Block and inexpensive tax services and even software like TurboTax, people do not see the value in any of it, which is why I'm encouraging all of you not to actually even fiddle with it. No one's going to pay you to do all this work. They're just going to shrug their shoulders and be like, well, that's your fault, or that's your job because you do my personal tax return. Well, no thanks, because this is a lot of work. But I wanted to show you what happens. Now, this may sound a bit overwhelming, especially at the personal tax level with all of these payments. And like I said before, that is why we're not doing personal work. It's more complicated and they pay less for it. Doesn't make sense, but that's just how it is. You might be asking yourself, with all of this that needs to be done, why would clients want to extend? I agree. If they can have their info into you on time and the books get done, I wouldn't extend them. But for those slow pokes or the folks not keeping up with your requests on the bookkeeping, let them feel this burden, this extension burden for a year, and they'll start doing what you ask the following year. You've got to kind of let them feel what extending a return is like, and they will start getting things to you on time in the following year. So let them feel that pain a little bit. However, 15% of your clients at least could care less about paying taxes on time, doing the returns on time, etc. They will be the ones that you extend year after year after year, and this is the process they would need to do. They are not going to, they won't, They will extend and not pay, and then on September 10th, give you what you need to file the corp return and do the same to whoever's doing their personal tax return on October 10th. Make sure they pay for that hassle. Create penalty fees for last minute stuff. Increase their fees. Do whatever you have to do so that dealing with problem clients that use extensions like, an excuse not to get you anything until the last minute, make them pay for it, or cull them out at some point. If you're not going, I always, instead of firing clients, I just like to raise fees on clients. I've never seen a reason to fire a client. I just call them and say, hey, by the way, we're doubling your fee. And they go, what are you talking about? Double? That's outrageous. Hey, if you can't pay it, I understand. You can go somewhere else. But if you do want to pay it, we're happy to do the work. We love having you here at double the fee. And some stay. You'd be shocked at what people will pay because they don't like change. All right, so let's get into next why extensions are related to the S-Corp election, right? Like, why are they in this? Why are both of these things in this video? I'm about to show you. Specifically, they're related if you're doing late S-Corp elections. So let me show you this. So in this example, your client had an LLC or corporation for all of 2017, but did not file an S-Corp election in 2017. They also did not file an extension for the S-Corp return by March 15th of 2018. Okay? You just met them July 21st of 2018 and started pitching them the idea of an S corporation. Now, most of the time, I'm going to try to late convert them for 2017 here if it's worth it, right? If they can save a significant amount of money. I don't really want to hassle with, trying to convert them if it's not going to be monetarily satisfying, not only for them, but for me. But let's say that they heard that sweet self-employment tax savings that you were dishing out to them, and they said, I gotta have it. I gotta have that money, which I can understand, right? Because we're very good at what we do. And you say, okay, fine, I will do this for you, but be ready to pay up, Mr. or Mrs., So we can late elect back to January 1st, 2017, so long as no return has been filed, right, for 2017? And in this case, let's say they hadn't. We do the election, the late election, and the IRS accepts it. Now, the IRS's system is going to immediately spit out a notice that says penalties are adding up because there was no S-Corp extension. Remember, there was no extension filed here on March 15th. So when all of a sudden their systems just magically converts, they don't say to themselves, oh, you just converted in July, so we'll give you a break. They don't say that. They say, we're going to assume you knew that you needed to do this and you should have extended your tax return. So now the penalties are adding up because there was no S-Corp extension. They will, want their pound of flesh for April, May, June, and July. There are now penalties. It could be about $200 per shareholder, and if there were 3 shareholders, it's adding up to $600 a month times 4 months, right? April, May, June, July. So, there could be $2,400 worth of penalties here if you had a 3 shareholder kind of situation. You can get out of them more than likely, okay? But if the savings was only a $1,000 or $2,000, it's not really worth the risk, right? Because what if you couldn't get out of them? Now this whole thing just costs them more money. If it's $8,000, yeah, do it. The point of this is that you need to warn your client, hey, you're going to get a notice when we do this. We're going to try and get out of these penalties. And when I say try and get out of these penalties, Halon will help you get out of these penalties because you have, if we're doing the tax return for you, you have the audit insurance and you send those penalties in and we write a letter and try and get out of them, right? We're not going to cover those penalties if you can't get out of them because, again, there's rules to Halon Defender that say you got to file on time or else we're not liable for these penalties if they're not in our system. If we extended it for you, then we would. But you should see now how these S-Corp elections and the extensions are kind of related, right? And if you're doing these, make sure you know what will happen. Let the client know. Then proceed based on what makes sense. Just let the client know. Say there could be penalties coming, The savings is going to be more than the penalty, and I think I can get out of the penalty, but you need to just be warned, if I can't get out of the penalty, this thing's not going to be as good. Clients will shake their head and go, well, I still want to do it. Trust me, they will. There's also no payroll on a late filed, return like this. So HALON is not going to cover a penalty related to officer's compensation. You realize that, right? And that's true for any return that does not show officer's compensation according to the matrix. We're going to not cover the penalties related to that. We'll still fight for you, but we're not going to pay out on that. I like to make that kind of clear as in each opportunity I have in these videos. So other than that, you can file them, just as I said, get them that 2017 tax return done, you show them the tax savings, and then make sure in 2018 that you're running payroll and all should be just fine. And you make money, they make money, everybody's happy, right? So let's go forward to our action plan here. We're done with the slides and we're almost done here. So just a couple of things. First, use HALON, 2553.halontax.com to generate your 2553 forms for you. Review my handout that's in the downloads about the different S-Corp election scenarios. Remember the 75-day rule for timely filed elections, and then that's 3 years and 75 days that you can go back, so long as they have not filed a return for any of those years. Now, let's say they filed a return for 16, but not for 17 and 18, and they wanted to go back all the way to 16, and it turns out they filed a return for 16. You could still do 17 and 18 because they hadn't filed a return for those years. So it's just the years that they have not filed. Now let's say they filed a return in 16, they didn't in 17, but then they filed a return in 18. Well, you can't go back to any of them because they've already messed things up with filing in 18. Makes sense? It needs to be kind of consecutive non-filing for the late election to work. And then extensions, keep in mind, extensions are due March 15th. March 15th is going to be a really big day in your life going forward, because that's when all this stuff is due, and you need to make sure everything is loaded in HALON. So if we don't file it, we extend it, right? All that extension stuff goes on Form 7004. On top of this, don't forget to contact HALON support when you have questions. We're here to help you with this type of thing. It can be tricky. So as I say to my staff when they get into a tricky situation, don't be a hero, man. Don't be a hero. Get some help. We're in this together. We're a team. So ask us and we will help you think it out. Okay? So that is the video for elections, S-Corp elections and extensions. Hope you enjoyed it. I've still got more for you in this Accounting 1 module. So I will see you in the next video. Thanks a bunch.